Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns and welcome once again to another edition of Sound Off Louisiana. And toward the very end of the last video that I did that was a solo video, I told you I'd be taking about a 2-week hiatus. I am now back and loaded down with plenty to report upon, but I will tell you that that 2-week hiatus was very refreshing, very nice. It also included my birthday on September the 10th. For those of you who may be curious, I am now 61 years old. We'll say a year older and a year wiser. At least hopefully that'll be the case. So far I don't appear to be waning. But at any rate, today we're going to focus in on a follow-up on the former Lieutenant Prentiss Arrest. You may recall we have reported upon the fact that he was arrested for alleged DWI by five Baton Rouge city police officers, give or take 5. It may be a little off, I don't remember from the accident report. We gave you the accident report in our prior feature, and we're going to give you the link for that prior feature. I will tell you that there are an awful lot of folk who have requested that I stay on top of this, and I am doing my very dead level best to do so. Mr. Prentiss Arrest was scheduled to be arraigned in Baton Rouge City Court yesterday, Monday, September the 16th, 2024. The arraignment was scheduled for 9 a.m. and so I did attend. And let me tell you something, this is my first foray into spending this kind of time and trying to figure out how things work at Baton Rouge City Court. I do want to say this, I had to interact with a number of the staff members, several of which I will be mentioning, and got their business cards. I do want to say that everyone with whom I interacted could not have possibly been more friendly, more cordial, more helpful. And it came in handy because unlike 19th JDC, where I readily told them I would know exactly what I'm doing in the lay of the land, like I said, this is my first foray into Baton Rouge City Court. So I walked into there and there were at least 50 people awaiting matters, and I thought, oh Lord, I said, I don't want to spend all this time and find out he's not even on the docket, because obviously I've seen the photo of him and I knew for a fact he was not in the courtroom. So I went up to a little lady that was having people check in, and I asked her if Mr. Arrest was on the docket. She had about a 3-page long docket, which was in very small print, so she looked over it quite thoroughly, and she said, no sir, he is not. And I said, okay, then I would assume it's been continued. I said, where can I find out if the matter has been continued so that I can know the continuance date, that the new arraignment date. So she told me to step outside of the court room and turn to my left, and I would see where I could get there. Well, I did exactly as she said. And let me just say there were about 30 people in that line. And I said, I'm not standing in a line of 30 people to just try to find out if this matter had been continued. So I rolled the dice and I got on the elevator figuring the city attorney's office is bound to be in this building somewhere. So I was going to go floor by floor. I stopped on floor 2. Guess what? When I made a left, it said city attorney's office. And guess what? There was only one person that was in there, a receptionist, nice as she could be. So I went in and I said, ma'am, can you tell me if the Prentiss Arrest matter has been continued? So she pulled up her handy-dandy, keyboard, and she said, can you spell the name? I spelled it for her, and she said, no sir, it has not been continued. It is on the docket to be here today. And I said, well, that's not what they told me downstairs. They told me that it was not on the docket. She said, well, I'll tell you what. She said, I'm going to print this out for you. And she printed out, I'm not going to provide a link for it because it's a little one-line deal. But she said, you take this down there and you show them this and you tell them that it has not been continued. And if it had been, it would be in the system. So I did exactly as she instructed. Like I said, everybody was most helpful. And I returned back to the first floor, went back to the young lady who had told me it's not on the docket, gave her this, and I said, the city attorney's office that I just went to, that you instructed me to go to, I didn't tell her I didn't go exactly where you told me to go, said that it most certainly is on the docket. And so she said, "Sir, would you mind having a seat on this front row?" Now you got to realize there's people are coming in. It is a madhouse in there. And the assistant DAs were working with people that were obviously willing to just pay their fines and go on about their life. But we're talking about, as I said, conservatively 50 people, and they're having to process all that. And here they've got me wondering about a matter that isn't on the docket. And so she said, "Sir, if you'll sit here on the front row," which they have instructions, do not sit on the front row. But I was told to ignore them and that they would find out what was going on. Okay, so I sit down on that front row, and she talks into her walkie-talkie, and she motioned me back up and made sure she had the spelling correctly. And I heard what she said. She said, "Look, we've got a matter that's on the docket, as evidenced by this." She said, "But I don't have the file." I don't know who she was communicating with. I presume it was somebody in the city attorney's office. So she said if I could just sit back down and be a little patient, that this matter would get handled. No, ma'am. I'm sorry, yes, ma'am. I don't have anywhere to go. It's a beautiful part about being retired, isn't it? So I sit down, and there's some discussions going on, and I can kind of sense that, okay, there's a focus on this now. But at any rate, they're calling up all the other folk. The judge makes an appearance, I don't know, 9:30, 9:40, because like I said, matters were able to be handled without the judge being present for those folks who had agreed to pay their fines, whatever the case. So the judge enters, and there were several people who were called up to be arraigned and pled either guilty in some instances, not guilty in others, although I think the vast majority were guilty. But I say they were guilty, they pled guilty. And so that lasted for, I don't know, 15 minutes, give or take. So then the assistant, and we're going to provide business cards. I'm going to provide photos of these business cards because, as I said, these ladies could not have been more helpful, as was the city police officer behind the counter. But I'll call this one out by name, and I don't want to botch her first name. Krishanda, Crishauna, Goldsby, Goldsby. She did the vast majority of all of the one-on-ones with all of the people who were being called up. And so by now, she has been curious about what my role is. By the way, with the receptionist in front of the city prosecutor's office, she asked me, "Well, are you a witness?" I said, "No," and I never tried to hide anything from anybody. I never do. I said, "No, ma'am." I said, "I'm with the media." I handed her a business card. I said, "This is a very high-profile case." I told her what it involved. I told her all of that prior to going back downstairs. So Miss Goldsby then asked me, "Okay, are you a witness?" I said, "No, ma'am, I'm with the media." Gave a business card, and I said, "This is a very high-profile case in which a then Louisiana State Police trooper was arrested for alleged DWI by several Baton Rouge City police officers," and I said, "and he resigned the next day, or the next business day, whatever the case." And so she said, "Oh, okay." So she said, "Just be patient with us. We don't have the file." And I said, "That's no problem. Now, I don't know how long it can take to get a file from one floor to the other, but I'm just relaying to y'all what all happened." So I returned. Now they don't want me to sit in the front anymore because presumably things are being resolved. So I go back to the general audience area as I was instructed to do. And the next stage is Miss Goldsby says, "All right, Your Honor, the following individuals we have properly served notice, and the paperwork has been appropriately processed, and they are not present in this courtroom today. Therefore, the prosecution moves for a bench warrant for their arrest." And she rattled off approximately, don't hold me to the exact number, but it was approximately 40 names. Okay. They finished all of that, and then the judge started handling a couple of other matters. So I'm here wondering, okay, Prentiss Ballew's name was not called. So when there was a brief little period I went up and I said, I didn't hear Prentiss Ballew's name called. What can you tell me what the status is? She readily said, I don't know. She said, we're still waiting on this file. So they admitted to me there was some texting going on involving Mr. Ballew. I don't know to whom, but at any rate, I sat back down, and so the young lady who I had first spoken with, the one who had said it was not on the docket, I said, look, can you assure me that this is on the docket? Oh, yes, sir, it's on the docket. And I said, well, when I first came in, you told me it wasn't on the docket. I said, can you tell me what's changed? Now, she said that she was working from a printout that had not been updated. All I can tell you is I've known that this was scheduled for arraignment for 6 weeks now. But I'm just telling you what got said. You know, I'm going to let our viewers form our own opinions about what may be going on here, may or may not be going on. But she said she was working from a printout which had not been updated. But that, yes, he is on the docket, notwithstanding her earlier telling me that it was not on the docket. I said, very well. I said, well, let me ask you this. I said, they've now completed calling out for these arraignments. I said, where does things stand? She said, you can rest assured that a bench warrant will be issued for his arrest. Nobody showed. Well, the judge had not called his name out, as was, I'm sorry, the Miss Goldsby had not called his name out, as has been done for approximately 40 others. So I asked the young lady at the reception area, I said, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but if he shows up, y'all would go ahead and process this, correct? She said, yeah, but nobody has shown up. And I said, I'm not leaving this courtroom until I know I can report accurately upon what the status of this case is as I departed this courtroom. I said, so, you know, no disrespect, but I'm going to go back and have a seat, and I am going to stay here until this court is adjourned, which I did. So I returned back, and the judge, who is Judge Jonelle Matthews, this Division C, Judge Jonelle Matthews, she handled a couple of other items, and she said, now, I skipped one little thing. Miss Goldsby did say, Your Honor, we have one other matter, and I apologize for this, but we don't have the file. Now, there's still people out in the audience that have their matters not yet resolved, although that's whittled down to probably about 16 at this point. So the judge said, okay, we're going to take a brief recess, and during that time, y'all go and get that file. Okay. Now, we can all have a different definition of brief, but she did tell the people in the audience that just hang tight, your matters will get heard or processed, but right now we're taking a brief recess. As I said, the word brief is subjective. The brief recess turned out to be approximately 22 minutes, give or take 3 minutes to one side or the other. I made note of the time when it reconvened. I don't think I had the exact time when the recess began, is why I want to give myself some wiggle room on the approximate 22-minute time frame. I have no idea what may all have been going on in the 22 minutes. However, apparently the file managed to make its way down. Oh, no, down. I'm sorry, down. I had it right. Down. And so the court reconvenes, and the judge says, okay, with regard to the DWI, obviously this was the only DWI on the docket, and she just referred to it as the DWI. Miss Goldsby kind of took the bull by the horns and said, okay, Prentiss Ballew, Prentiss Ballew. Well, clearly he was not there. So the judge had one other minor matter that she was hearing, and then it was, you know, established that Mr. Ballew was not in the courtroom. In fact, the judge said, is he in this courtroom? No, ma'am, he does not appear to be in the courtroom. Is he in this courthouse, perhaps in the wrong courtroom? No, ma'am, there's no evidence that he is in this courthouse. At that point, and I possibly could be slightly misquoting because there was that other little matter, but this is what I heard, which is that Judge Jonell said, okay, well, we'll reschedule this for tomorrow. Okay. So with that, she said, court is now adjourned. And so now you've still got 15 people that, give or take, that have to get matters resolved. However, apparently they were not going to require the judge's involvement. So I went up to the counter. By now, everybody knows who I am, why I'm there. They know the nature of the case. And so they kind of, both the Baton Rouge City Police officer, who again, she was as gracious as she could be to me, as was everyone else. But I asked Miss Goldsby, I said, okay, did I understand correctly that this matter will be rescheduled for tomorrow? She said, I'm not sure, but I think not. And I said, oh, okay. So I sat back down. I was not leaving there until I said, no disrespect, but I want to know what the status of this case is authoritatively before I leave this courtroom. So I sat back down. A few minutes later, in comes the judge. Now remember, court is adjourned. But the judge said, okay, we need to take up the matter of the DWI, which kind of had been taken up before, and court had been adjourned, but court is now reconvened. And so Miss Goldsby said, Your Honor, all of the paperwork has been properly processed, and Mr. Ballou has not shown up for this arraignment. Therefore, the prosecution would move for a bench warrant to be issued for his arrest. And Judge Matthews said, and that motion is granted, a bench warrant will be issued for Mr. Ballou's arrest. With that, I knew I had authoritatively on the record how this matter was handled. And with that, I stood up. Now, there's still 15 or so people left. I graciously waved at everyone, to include the Baton Rouge City Police officer. For the record, she happened to be a black female, not that that's really any relevance, but again, all of them had been as gracious as I could ever ask for, and I very much appreciated it. And she smiled back at me and waved, you know, that, okay, everything is now fully known and resolved. So that is the sequence that took place in court yesterday. I am not going to speculate on, because I'll let everybody form your opinions of what may have been going on behind the scenes. We are talking about a rather protracted period from when I first asked, is this on the docket, which was a little after 9 o'clock, approximately 9:10, and the final order for the issuance of the bench warrant, which took place at approximately 11:23. So that's 2 hours and 20 minutes. Mr. Ballou, as I recall correctly, lives in St. Francisville, so it certainly would have been possible to have navigated that much of a trip if there was. And I'm not saying there was, but if there was any effort to alert him that, hey, you're not here and you're supposed to be, or whatever the case. But the final matter was that a bench warrant was issued for his arrest. Now, I'm going to wrap up this feature in saying, when I did the last feature, I spoke in some rather, I didn't speak, it's in the text, some rather vague language about what had been reported to us by a number of sources, and I will reveal that those sources are comprised of former black troopers, okay? And I personally don't think it's any huge secret what's on that body cam. And as you will know from the last feature, I made public records request for the body cam, and I was told that that's not going to be provided, apparently not until this matter is fully adjudicated, which in order to have happened yesterday would have meant him showing up and pleading guilty or accepting a plea deal, which is exactly why I was there. So I don't think I have to get specific about what's on that body cam. I think you have enough intellect to know what I have been told is on that body cam. Furthermore, since I initially made that written commentary, vague, not getting specific, of what's on that body cam. I have had subsequent conversations with people who are in a position to know, and they have told me it is, quote, far worse than you have been told, unquote. I'll let it go at that. That pretty much wraps up this feature, but I have no intention of letting this or any other matter entailing state police fall through the cracks for which I am aware. It's just not in my DNA. I'm sorry for those who it may frustrate. I do not have very much confidence at all in the current administration. My sentiments, I can tell you, are shared by a number of folk for obvious reasons who can't go public. But I actually wonder if the confidence in Louisiana State Police, especially when it comes to transparency, has not hit an all-time low. And unless and until that changes, you're going to have a real problem trying to gain respectability for that uniform. And in my opinion, we're not making progress, and if anything, we are regressing. But it is what it is. I am going to report things as they are, and if that ever changes, I will be more than happy to get in front of this camera and praise state police for progress that it has made in reversing what is a very long-term downward spiral. But we are not there today. Thank you once again for tuning in to this Sound Off Louisiana feature, and we look forward to bringing you coverage of the upcoming Louisiana State Police Commission meeting, which will happen 2 days from today. Thank you once again.